Welcome everyone to the April Hangout. Sorry, a little bit late in starting. Just had to surmount a few little techie issues, but I think we're up and running now, which is great. So welcome everyone. Well, I can just see I've got my chat window here on one computer. I've got the screen here on another. So I'm just going to wait for a few more people to join before we get going. Let me just throw in a little greeting. Yeah, there we go. I can see a few people have joined us already. So Carlos in Portugal, hi there. Dmitry Mikhailov, David Ortolina in Romania. Well, greetings to all of you. We seem to be up and running, and that's great. So let me tell you what I'm going to be doing to this Hangout. Of course, you can ask me any questions you want. I'm not guaranteed to answer them, of course, but I'll do my best. I'm going to be looking at two games. I'm going to be looking at Kramnik against Pentala, Vladimir Kramnik against Hangout, which was played in the recently in the Shamkir tournament. Of course, that tournament's still going on. Some of you might have seen that Wesley So scored a superb victory today against Sergei Karyakin. That is a big victory. And he outplayed him in, well, kind of Magnus style, actually, dare I say it, or in classic Wesley So style. And the other game I want to look at is from the Reykjavik Open, which has been won today by Kramnik-Giri. And 2 days ago, yesterday it was. Giri, I think it was yesterday. Giri played an absolutely superb game with black, with the closed Catalan, which is an opening that interests me very much. So we're going to be looking at that as well. So here we go. I've got some more greetings. We've got greetings from, got someone in Montreal. We've got Rawand Hamid from Kurdistan. Well, that's a cool one. Oh, I don't think we've had anyone from Kurdistan before. So greetings to you. Padlo Yar asked, do I play chess these days? No, I don't. No, I've got, I'm too busy with other stuff. If you want to play chess professionally, you have to devote yourself 100% to it. And I can't do that. I've got too much other stuff in my life. So no, not at the moment. And we've got someone in Drag Shoot in Ottawa. We've got the Bucksteen in the Netherlands. And we have Herr Schnupka from good old Deutschland. Anton in Vienna. Wonderful. Okay, listen, I'm going to start. We can't do this all night. So I'm going to switch to this first game I mentioned, which was Vladimir Kramnik against Kramnik-Harikrishna. This was an absolutely wonderful game. English Refugee asks, do I play for fun? No, I've never played for fun. So here we go. So Kramnik has white. Of course, if you have questions in the middle of this, then I'll be looking at the chat box. So do ask any questions about this game. So Kramnik, interestingly, seems to have switched to the Spanish, or switched to e4. In the recent Zurich tournament, Zurich Chess Challenge, where I was commentating, he played, I think he played a little bit of e4, but he was mainly playing d4 and these kind of, well, I call them compromise systems, like this and here, and bishop g5 he played. He also played with e3, this kind of stuff, and played a kind of collar Zuckertort variation with b3. That was interesting. He did that against Nakamura, for example, and in a few other games as well. So yeah, interesting to see him coming back to main lines, but not d4 or c4 main lines. He's playing e4, which is incredible to see. Guillaume Cartier says, I'm so clueless to what Kramnik played in the position of the previous video. Really curious. Okay, well, you'll be able to see in a moment. So it's a mainline Spanish. Well, I say mainline because, of course, the absolute mainline is now rook e1 to protect the pawn. And then b5, and then, well, Black can threaten to play a marshal if he wishes, but then there are various anti-marshal systems with a4 or d3 or a3, h3, lots of moves. But it's interestingly, in this position, instead of rook e1, Kramnik plays d3, and this is very popular these days. And, well, why not? You know, White often tries to, well, tries to play without rook e1. Sometimes you can do that. Of course, there's a threat to play bishop takes, so Black has to react straight away. So b5. And we have a kind of anti-marshal system here already with d3, except the rook isn't on e1. So sometimes that can be an advantage for White. Sometimes you can do without the rook move. After d6, as the e5 pawn is now protected, then Black has a threat. Black is now threatening to grab that important bishop. And as we all know, bishops are worth more than knights. Trust me, folks. Anand's got it all wrong. He's got it all wrong. So Kramnik played a3 just to give that bishop a little retreat there. Could also play c3 there, but a3 is fine. And this position has been played very often. So here's an example of how sometimes White can get away with omitting rook e1. Sometimes that knight will go into d5. Sometimes it even spins around to g3. And, well, we know very often that this is the classic route for the knight. Knight b1 to d2 to f1 to g3. But in this way, White can also get it to g3 in 3 moves, but hasn't had to play rook e1. So that's one possible way where omitting rook e1 can be useful. So let's see. Knight b8. Now there are played here, and this is the classic Breyer maneuver to put the knight on d7 and possibly play c5, but also it lets the bishop onto this long diagonal. But many moves have been tried here. You might remember from well, world championship matches, for example. This was played in one of the Karajakin-Carlsen games, that in fact famous one where Carlsen won beautifully, and so on. That was from the playoff. Okay, just leads to very double-edged positions. You can also play bishop e6, as also played in one of the Karajakin-Carlsen games, and so on. That was, yeah, that wasn't one of the playoff games. That was in regular time. So lots of possibilities. I mean, it's just a typical rich Spanish position where, although for the moment the pawns aren't engaging and the pieces aren't engaging for the time being, in fact, there's a lot of tension building. And the reason why white has any kind of advantage in this position, well, at least theoretically, is because of the relative merits of these bishops. The bishop on b3 is outside the pawn chain and has a nice diagonal. The equivalent bishop, 7, is blocked in. Seems to me it's kind of logical to play bishop e6 in this position to try and exchange off that strong bishop. But Harikrishna goes another way, and as I said, with knight b8, and this keeps more tension in the position. So knight e2. Well, knight e2 is certainly not the only move in this position, but I guess a logical one. I don't think it makes sense to play knight d5 here, because that could be traded. And then, well, simply c6, and the bishop goes back, let's say here. And then, well, I just don't think black is under any pressure. I mean, you could play bishop e6. Could play knight out first, just to see what happens. But I don't think white really gains any advantages from trading the knights there. I guess, yeah, what else is an option? Difficult to see what else white can do, actually. I think knight e2 makes sense because it's spinning round to this potential outpost, looking at f5. So all very normal so far. And c5 has been played before. Indeed, I think it was the first of the Karjakin-Carlsen playoff games, and that's a pretty logical sequence with the bishop kind of neutralizing white's bishop here. Let's go back. Instead, Harikrishna played knight d7, and the knight came out to g3. Knight c5. Hang on, that's the wrong position. That was played in Fressinet against Sargsyan. See, that's another example of how black neutralizes this bishop on a2, and I think that's a very logical way of playing the position, I have to say. Go back. Sorry if that was confusing. I got confused as well. So c3 played, and bishop b7. I think the only thing is, so this is the classic Breyer setup, and I think this is very, very harmonious. You see this particular piece configuration, for example, in against the Najdorf, or in the Najdorf. And there it makes a lot of sense because the knight and bishop, imagine there's no pawn on d3 in an open Sicilian, and these pieces combine to attack the pawn on e4. But here, and in the Breyer, the white's pawn is on d4, but here, pawn is still on d3, so it doesn't look quite as nice for the knight and bishop. Okay, let's see how this works out in practice. Rook e8 is possible, to do the standard curl up and to play g6 to guard this point. I guess knight g5 is then possible, but okay, d5 is very unclear. But okay, I can understand why Harikrishna didn't want to risk that, and he played c5. Then rook e1. Okay, so why rook e1 now? Well, what he's doing is obviously he's protecting e4 now, and that's necessary because in some positions black wants to play c4 to undermine the protection for the pawn on e4. So rook e1 makes sense. And sometimes white can play d4 as well. Rook c8. Now, to my eyes, I have to say, a kind of very logical move here would be just to duck out with the bishop, just duck away with the bishop. Just to play bishop a2, because clearly black is aiming for c4. And this is such a glorious piece on this diagonal. So if c4 in this position, could conceivably take this pawn actually and play knight d2, attacking the pawn here. This is defended. So black hasn't got time to play this, I don't think. And let's say knight b6, but the knight looks a bit weird here. So there's pressure here. Let's say queen here, then knight f5. You know, that could be pretty nice for white actually. If nothing else, to take a bishop. And it, yeah, I mean, it's double-edged, of course. You know, black can hold this. If black holds this pawn, then you could argue this bishop is a bit locked out of play. But I don't know, looks interesting for white. And the other way to play, if white isn't keen on that, is just to, after c4, to advance with d4. So we have a very normal Spanish structure. In the Brea, often the position closes and then the knight comes here, but at the moment there's not enough pressure to force white forward. I guess rook e8 would be the move, followed by bishop here. Well, we just have a typical Spanish position on the board, quite double-edged. Maybe white could open things here. It's not too late to play b3 to open this diagonal as well. That could be interesting. That's quite double-edged because, of course, black would have a chance to attack here, but it could be nice to force this one back. Oh, maybe I've managed to play something very strong. I don't know, with big pressure on f7. Of course, black doesn't need to take. It's possible just to defend this pawn. But my point is this: that coming back here, bishop a2, I think, is an extremely logical move. Duck out of c4. But instead, Kramnik played an ambitious move, knight f5. He just wants to take the bishop, which is a fine thing. Even though that bishop isn't doing much at the moment, then two bishops, that bishop could always pop out. So, you know, not, of course, it's a good idea. The only problem is that after c4, then white's structure is undermined. I think white should take, because if the bishop ducks back, then takes, let's say bishop takes, then knight c5. And now, well, white certainly doesn't want to give up the bishop, but this pawn is attacked as well. So clearly that's worked out very nicely. I've just seen on the chat box, AZ Lionheart says knife f5. Well, knight f5 actually, but yes, it's always fun to get that knight in. It is a powerful piece. But this is the problem for white, that now this important centre pawn disappears. But let's see. Knight takes bishop. I'm assuming, it's funny, I didn't really consider this. I'm assuming this isn't very good, because I guess we can take here, damage the pawns, because of course if queen takes, then here. Pawn takes just doesn't look very nice. Maybe we just take here and pawn takes pawn. Well, I have to say this is not out of the question. It's not out of the question for white to play in this way, actually, because those bishops are potentially pretty tasty. That's a beautiful diagonal. The bishop could sit on e3. I wouldn't dismiss this. Maybe there's something better for black. I mean, black should be okay as well, but that's quite a double-edged position, actually. Maybe, am I missing something here? Maybe black does something better. I don't see it at the moment, actually. Takes. No, I think that's probably best continuation, but yeah, it's possible for white to play like that. Raland Hamid says it's Ben Feingold's favourite move. I see. Well, knight f5 isn't just Ben Feingold's favourite move. It's Garry Kasparov's favourite move. He loved the knight on f5 when there was a castled king here. Anyway, Kramnik simply took on e7. And now we have even pawns, but okay, it's a very unbalanced position, because if black can consolidate, then he has a nice pawn center, beautiful bishop on the long diagonal. You have to trust center pawns. Kramnik played bishop g5. Now I don't know if that's absolutely necessary. Maybe he has to start doing that because knight c5 could come. Well, anyway, let's crack on with the game. And h6. Now, if Kramnik wants to play in a calmer manner, then he could exchange here, and let's say play rook e3, well, possibly even bishop d5, something like this. And it's hard to believe that white is worse here once we how Kramnik, he doesn't like to back down. He pushes things. I think he doesn't like to compromise in any way. And it's interesting how his style, I don't know if it's changed. But maybe it's more exaggerated than it used to be. So g5, this is why moving the bishop to h4 is so provocative, because yeah, this bishop is being pushed around. Incidentally, that's not entirely stupid to give up a piece. I think white has, well, certainly white has reasonable compensation in the form of these bishops. That's a strong piece, and this rook could swing up. Maybe that's only for a blitz game, but that's not so stupid. Okay, the bishop came back, and bishop h7. And now we are reaching the absolute critical phase of the game, where neither side wants to back down. Both sides are playing in such an uncompromising way. If white is too slow here, he will get rolled away by these pawns, just spinning down the board. So Kramnik has to react. He cannot back down here. If he plays a half move, then he will just be blown away. And I think this was the position that I left you all with in my little teaser of a video where I was saying, what did Kramnik do next? Well, no one predicted this move, and that's rook d5. That's a very unusual move, but the intention is absolutely plain. Because the only way to make sense of rook d5 is after f5 to sacrifice. Otherwise, there is just no point at all. And Vlad now sacrificed an entire rook with rook takes e5. I guess, let me see, could he, I didn't really think about this because the game was so spectacular, but could he do this? Probably not. I guess f4 is a good move, actually, now that I look at it. Yeah, this looks very strong because suddenly both pieces are threatened. The bishop is trapped, the knight's trapped. Right. That's why he didn't do that, and that's why he had to sacrifice a whole rook. This is just amazing. And now, bishop e5 check. And now the knight came back. So, what's the score? Well, it's a rook against two pawns, but look at those two beauties. Look at those two bad boys raking across the board. Oh yeah, this is why we love the bishops. And this is already, all the pressure is on black here. Incredibly, I mean, Harikrishna played knight f6 here, but incredibly, king g6 is probably the best move. Not an obvious move, you know, just shuffling the king up the board, particularly when after a move like bishop d4, suddenly there's the chance to attack the king again. The problem is that for black, then bishop g8 is a very strong move. And after knight e5, the king actually finds a decent square here. Now, it's still not completely clear because here bishop b1 can be played. But that's probably the best continuation. Anton M asks, why not rook d6 straight away? In this, instead of rook e5, rook d6. Okay, let me take a look. Rook d6, well, it's possible, but I'll take. And then, well, I think, well, king g6 is possible, but I think it might be time to compromise and play rook f6. Because if the rook is taken, then that's a clear piece, and I don't think, I mean, white has two pawns, but it shouldn't be enough. And it's not easy to see how white makes any more progress there. So I think Kramnik's sacrifice is by far the best. Guillaume Cartier says, after rook d6, what about knight g3? Let's have a look at that. That could be much simpler. Thank you, Guillaume. That is probably simpler. Let me just check something. Queen back, queen here. I guess the knight pops out. Yep, looks, probably looks, then b4. This could be a little bit tricky. No, because obviously if the knight moves, then I've got rook d7, but knight here. Now, do I have a good square for the queen, or is this just nonsense? I've got to keep hold of the rook, so maybe queen here. Yeah, I'll look at queen e5 in a second, but this is sort of tastier in a way. But then knight here. Yes, queen e5 is possible. I was trying to avoid the trade of queens. Now, rook or knight. If knight takes, then the knight comes back. White, what's the score? White has 2 pawns, rook here. Well, white has a little bit of compensation, but in my opinion, not sufficient. And rook takes. I'll play knight back again. Okay, now check. This could be more serious. This is more serious. Yes, that's 3 pawns. And that is pretty serious. Yes, so maybe queen e5. We got there by process of elimination. Yeah, so probably not knight g3. However, I do think that simply taking this and rook f6, black should be okay there, and Kramnik's sacrifice offers greater practical chances. Sorry, I'm flicking through these moves very quickly. I'm analysing on the hoof. So here we go. This is the game continuation. Bishop g8. Sorry, this is not the game continuation. He didn't play king g6. Instead, he played knight f6. And suddenly, after this move, I suspect that Harikrishna underestimated queen takes b5. Because it's not the most obvious move. It's a simple capture, and there's no immediate threat for white afterwards. So yeah, I suspect he underestimated this move, and suddenly it's not so clear because white is able to start rolling these queenside pawns down the board. Now, this move, h3, this is an unbelievably cool move from Kramnik. I have to say, I'm so impressed by this. He's a whole rook down, okay, 3 pawns, but still no immediate threat, and yet he takes a time out to give his king a little luft at the side of the board. And bishop g8, and naturally at the moment white doesn't want to exchange off one of those glorious bishops. And now things start to get a bit tasty on the queen side, with those pawns are rolling down the board. And it's funny how, in spite of the extra rook, it's just so hard to alleviate the pressure of those bishops. Queen c6 was played. Now, when I was looking at this earlier with a computer, the machine liked the look of queen a6 and still thought that black was better. But the more I played, interestingly, the less it liked the position. So, okay, I'm going to say this is not forced. Well, as you see, I've written here, first the computer thinks black is better, but the more that the line continues, the more it likes white's position, or at least things even up. I should stress, this is not a forced continuation, but it's just indicative of what could happen. So one of the bishops has gone, but white is so active here. This initiative is quite extraordinary, and still enormous pressure on this diagonal. Now, I played out like 30 moves. And at the end of these 30 moves, somehow miraculously, I ended up in this bonkers line with a draw. I stress, this is not a forced line. This is very much a computer line, but Basically, this ends in a draw by perpetual check. I mean, but it just shows that all I'm saying is that it's just so hard for black to deal with this initiative. So here we go, Queen B2. Hey, Gabe, how you doing? Greetings to you in LA. Oh, fantastic. Enjoy your lunch break, mate. That puts a smile on my face. Okay, here we go. So Kramnik is now revving up. If anyone used to play a computer game many, many years ago called Space Invaders, then you'll recognize what's happening here. One of those pawns is one of those aliens that's going to make a touchdown, and black's position is going to blow up. From here on, black is basically bust. It's incredible. Let me. Harikrishna took on f3. What happens on this one? Let me see. I'm going raw here. No computer assistance. Check, check. Here we go. Rook takes, and it's over. Queen f6 mate. I'm glad I found that one. Okay. Okay, so instead of that, he took on f3, and the game ended there. Harikrishna resigned. Just an incredible performance. So in this position, white's still an exchange down, but well, if queen takes, then bishop g6. Rook takes, that's pretty good. Otherwise, rook back, c7. And yeah, I think that's going to be the end of that. Absolutely brilliant. Let me come back to normal. There we go. So yeah, before we look at Anish Giri's game, let me take a few more questions. I can see your chat here. But I thought, I mean, that was just classic Kramnik. You know, sometimes he crashes, but I think he is one of the most interesting players on the scene, and it's extraordinary how his style has evolved. You know, if you remember in the early 2000s, he was, you know, playing the white side of a Catalan quite carefully, and then suddenly he was playing the white side of a Catalan and sacrificing pawns and pieces and God knows what. And yeah, we still see him play like that. Absolutely remarkable. What a game, says David Herrera. I completely agree. By the way, his game against Nakamura from Zurich Chess Challenge was a fantastic game where Kramnik also played in this fantastic style, sacking a pawn. Well, not a rook, but you know, he sacked a pawn, and for a long-term initiative. It's a fascinating game where Kramnik had a queen and knight attacking against Nakamura's queen and bishop, and Kramnik almost won, but Nakamura defended very well. Douglas Squirrel says Jan's video on that game was also fun to watch. Liked your experimental detours. Steve065 says, hi Daniel, can you recommend any good books for beginners? Depends how much of a beginner you are. Clearly you know the moves. So I don't know, there are so many good books. Let me see, a book for beginners. Probably you want something fun, don't you? I don't know. I mean, I like. I think, you know, if you're a beginner, it's good to get something that's going to inspire you. So pick a book on, you know, one of the World Championship matches. Find a classic book on, for example, Fischer-Spassky from 1972. something where the explanations are very detailed. And, you know, get inspired by the story. There you go. That's my advice. Let me see. Blazero asks, did I ever play the English defense? I certainly did. The English defense, I assume you mean C4 and B6. Absolutely. Yeah, I played that a lot. Very enterprising. WWF All Stars says, could I play against King Crusher? Well, I could, but I don't think it'd be much of a match. I'm sorry. Remy Rushbrook asked, Danny, are you going to Brazil for the Junior Chess Championships? Well, no. No, I'm not doing much. I'm doing a few coaching jobs at the moment, but no, I'm not accompanying any kids there. Steve-O65 says I'm 1300 online. Well, like I said, Steve-O, get a book that inspires you. Fisher's Battery 1972, loads of good books on that. Raman Hamid asks, who do I think will play Magnus in the next World Championship? Well, Wesley So is obviously on extremely good form at the moment, and I would love to see a Wesley against Magnus match, I have to say. But it's hard to get through the candidates. You know, this 8-player tournament, it's really tough to qualify from there, and you know, anything can happen, as we saw last time. I wouldn't have put Karyakin as a favourite last time, but he got through, you know, pipped Caruana at the death. Very close. Ravi Parimi asked, Danny, did I know Raymond Keane or Harry Golombek personally? Well, I still know Raymond Keane personally, indeed. Harry Golombek, yeah, of course. Harry was part of the English chess scene. You know, I used to meet him regularly. I didn't know him very well. To be honest, you know, when I knew him, he was getting on a bit in years, and he was a bit doddery, and he used to repeat the same stories over and over again, and forgotten that he told them the first time, if you see what I mean. But of course, he was a very interesting man, and you know, he had some incredible experience. Let me see. Anton M says I was mean. Oh, I'm so sorry. Listen, Trifon is a friend of mine. It was a. Oh, I'm not going to go there. Let me see. Daniel, what do I reckon? What's good strategy in rapid play? Rapid play. Well, I don't know. It's play quick. I know it sounds stupid, but play quickly. Don't overthink your moves. You know, you've got to play from feeling, basically. Dimitri says, what's happened to Magnus's hair and style? Does he start wearing glasses? He started wearing glasses. He's short-sighted or long-sighted. He was getting headaches, so it seems very sensible that he wears glasses. But anyway, okay, listen, enough questions. I'm going to look at one more game, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. You know, Kramnik-Harikrishna is often given a hard time for drawing lots of games in these elite tournaments. But, you know, when he plays in open tournaments, he consciously changes his style. Hang on a second, let me just sort out this window. Sorry, folks. I'm just getting the right position up on the board and not doing it at the moment. Hang on, just bear with me. Yep, here we go. Okay, so as I said, Kramnik-Giri has just won the Reykjavik Open, and style when he plays in open tournaments, as he does occasionally. And this, I thought, was a remarkable game. So Giri playing black. Now, you know, in elite tournaments, he's very happy, for example, to play mainline Catalans. But basically, if white wants to draw in these kind of positions, then white can get it very, very easily. It's black that struggles to equalize. Or, I mean, there are many things that white can do. You know, Giri himself likes to play a4, and these variations, which offer white, you know, a minimal advantage. But seriously, very hard to win with black. But what's interesting, said that in this position, Giri is happy to play a closed system, and he's playing a closed Catalan. Now, I'm an advocate of the closed Catalan, but if I can do a compare and contrast, I'm going to go way back to the beginning. In this position, well, as some of you know, I recommended bishop b4 check on my latest DVD, and then playing the bishop back to d6 or bishop e7, and playing this form of closed Catalan with the bishop on d2. And it makes a difference because white has to move this bishop first in order to play knight d2 and then potentially e4. So, you know, white would like to play this very quickly. That's one of the reasons why I play bishop b4 check, to put the bishop on d2. So if I can compare and contrast with what we've reached in this game, you can see it's the same position, but the bishop wasn't on d2, so the knight is able to go to d2, and that means that white can get in a e4 immediately. And this is why I'm not too keen on this variation for black. And, well, this has been seen many times before. And this move, in particular, queen a4, this is quite, this is the recommended line, queen a4. Now, it looks unusual to put the queen on a4. The point is to actually slow down black's queenside counterplay, because if the queen goes back to, well, let's say the normal square d1, then black will play queen c7. This, again, this has been played many times before. Queen c2, trade off into this endgame, and although white has a space advantage, in fact, black is doing okay here. This, for example, this was a game played between Addison and Reykjavik in 1967. Where Reykjavik, I think, plays model defensive strategy, exchanging off this light squared bishop. And he drew the game very, very easily. Okay, let me go way back. So that's why white is playing queen a4. Because clearly playing queen c7 and queen down here is impossible when this knight is on prise. Also, for a moment, bishop a6 is prevented as well. So bishop f1. Now, what white is doing, ideally, white would like to play the bishop around here. And obviously the position is very much like a French defense, and white starts attacking on the king side. So queen a4 is a little diversion. I mean, the queen eventually wants to come back here and spin over to the king side. This is a new move in the position. I think Giri had done some research. This is Houdini's first choice. Previously, instead of queen e8, a5 had been played, which is a kind of logical move in order to, maybe play the bishop here. Then, for example, this here. Well, okay, this is possible, and this is a little bit unusual. This is quite a double-edged position as well. But queen e8, that is a new move. Now, clearly the intention is to play knight takes e5, and there's a little tactic here. So king g2 prevents that. I'm going to have to rush through a few moves. Now, knight b8. Of course, if white wants to play safely, then he could trade off pieces. Trade off. But maybe black has gained a bit of time compared to that Reykjavik game we just looked at. But ideally, white should be trying to keep queens on in this position. After queen d1, then black has reorganized. And indeed, with the king on g2 and the bishop opposite, then it's tempting to play for f6. That's quite dynamic. So white decided quite bravely to play queen takes a7. Arthur Chloe asks, why isn't queen takes a7 possible? Well, it is possible. Let's have a look. The bishop came back to a8. And the only thing is, this queen is finding it difficult to get back to base. But this is very brave for both players, because clearly white is lagging behind in development. Black is 2 pawns down. So we're seeing another side to Hangout here. He sacrificed 2 whole pawns. Okay, I'm going to have to zip through these moves pretty quickly. But now things start to open up. So while these pieces are still asleep, then suddenly on the other side of the board. Now, if e takes, then it's not clear how much compensation black has, but I can imagine white would be pretty terrified of this. Don't forget that bishop. So let's go back. Sorry, queen b3 played, f6, and now queen e3, queen f7. So black building up now. Takes here, and the king step back. Bishop g2 looks correct to me. And obviously black has compensation, but it's not so clear. But queen f4 is definitely a mistake, because now black takes the initiative. This is really serious. And this was taken, and now queen g7. So Giri has sacrificed another pawn. He's now 3 pawns down, but this is fantastically strong, because once that center pawn goes, then these pawns start to look really menacing, and that bishop rips across through to white's king. And just take a look at what happens now. And I don't have too much time to go into detail here, but basically white is lost from this point. There is nothing that he can do. You can see these pieces are just bystanders on the queen side, and Black's pieces are absolutely wonderful and it's beautifully centralized. F4 leaves black with these wonderful passed pawns, but I guess there's nothing you could do. E takes F3 actually wins here, and F2 with the idea of this and this. But Giri didn't bother taking, he just came back again. And he wins beautifully like this. I'm just going through very, very quickly, guys. Every picture tells a story. Look at those bishops. Look at those beautiful pawns. And look at that king. Well, if somebody said to you centralization doesn't matter, then just show them this position. Oh boy, here we go. Now, a beautiful final move, Queen F7. Wonderful X-rays here. So let's see. If Knight F6, well, first of all, if bishop takes queen, then check. And that's the end of that. Oh, probably I should get a rook. Oh, maybe you not even bother getting a rook. Take that one. That's also checkmate. Go back. And if, well, obviously bishop takes, then queen takes, and knight f6, then rook c5. I mean, there are lots of ways to win. This will do nicely. I like rook c5 because it's just holding the tension again. Queen takes queen. Absolutely brilliant. I really love the way that Anish played that game. Okay, I think I'm going to have to wrap things up there as I'm almost out of time. I can just answer a few more questions. Let me see. Boyan Maximovich says, I cannot watch live because I have homework in school. Brilliant. Listen, I think you made a good choice. Keep watching. Remy Rushbrook asks, what do you think of the Belgrade Gambit? I think it's good fun. It's obviously not, I mean, it depends on what level you play these. You know, in professional chess, it's not very good. Amateur level, it's good fun, you know, if you know something about it and you're prepared to give up a few pawns. Harris Nabil asked, Daniel, what do you think about the English opening for a beginner? Well, you know, English is obviously a good opening, but basically, I think it's good to play in a straightforward manner when you start out. You know, play e4 or d4 and put your pieces in the center. You know, start with classical chess. Once you understand that, it will take you a long way. Then you can experiment with flank openings. That would be my advice. I think it's better, if you're a beginner, it's better to start like that. English Refugee says Giri's After Magnus book was amusing. Yes, it was amusing. Giri, Anish can be quite waspish, actually. And that book, in some cases, was quite waspish. But amusing for it. Remy Brush asked, what do you think of Peter Svidler? Peter's a friend of mine, he's a nice guy. Salt Langsfart Lacris asks, what's your favorite opening? Well, I love playing the Sicilian Najdorf with black. I love playing e4 with white and attacking. I really like the Queen's Gambit Decline with black. Not a very popular open, often not so popular. Let me see. Question. Noman Neskio asks, would Anand recognize you if he saw you on the street? This is a fantastic question. Yes, there you go. It was with Vishy last week at the Zurich Chess Challenge where I was commentating, and it was always good to see him. Okay, I'm going to leave things there. Thanks very much for joining me. Of course, this will be posted on the Power Play Chess channel afterwards, so you can check out the games afterwards if you want to. And don't forget that we are coming up to May, and we're approaching the 5th birthday of the Power Play Chess channel. It would be great if you joined in the celebration, and I'll be posting a special series starting at the beginning of May. So do watch out for that. And well, if you'd like the channel to go on for another 5 years, then do consider giving us a donation, either a one-off donation on PayPal or a regular monthly contribution on patreon.com. I'm going to put that in. Hang on a second, I'll write that in the chat. Patreon.com. Do check out the Power Play Chess page. Power Play Chess on patreon.com, where, you know, if you make a monthly contribution, you can enjoy rewards like extra videos, that kind of thing. Remy Rothbrook says is a Patreon. Good man, Remy. That's what I like to hear. And you can make a monthly contribution of as little as you like or as much as you like. Okay, thanks, folks. I'll see you later. Thanks for joining me. Bye now.